during the day that we had thought we'd made payroll, a bill had gotten paid out of the account, and it was causing there not to be enough money for folks' checks to get cashed. And so there was 3 or 4 people got turned away before it got back to us, and I had to hurry to get to the bank and take money out of our personal account to make sure that the money was there for people to be paid.
From 2 Media, it's Give 'Em the Business, a show about Black entrepreneurs and business leaders sharing their stories of adversity and success. I'm Troy Evans, and on today's show, my guest is Mark Wilson, founder of Ryla Teleservices and Chime Solutions. When most people think of big business call centers, they often imagine outsourcing to overseas companies where labor is cheap, but customer service can face significant cultural barriers. However, Mark Wilson had a different vision. He recognized the untapped qualified talent within Black communities across America and was determined to create career opportunities for those often left out of the American dream. Success meant drawing upon the invaluable lessons he learned growing up in the Elm Grove housing projects.
I fondly look back on the days at Elm Grove when, we didn't have much and it was very modest and humble setting, but none of us really knew that. It was all family, and it was definitely it takes a village approach toward, raising kids. There were any number of moms that could discipline me. Right. I'd get disciplined by them and then get home and get, and have it again. Right. So, but no, there was a lot that came out of that. And as I look back now, I'm appreciative, and it does inform how I think about things today. It's just at my core, a lot of what happened there, I think, is influential on that.
I find that a lot of successful entrepreneurs have a beginning that is not necessarily the most protective or what have you. There's a lot of struggle in there. And you mentioned buried diamonds and whatnot in your book. But, you talked about the systemic discrimination of allowing the projects to be flooded all the time, and how that was just kind of a routine for you and your family to just pick up the pieces and keep it going. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we lived in Elm Grove's housing projects, and it was fairly typical if it rained hard, if there was any kind of storm, that there would be flooding in the town, and the projects would always flood. So I reference in the book Katrina and how everybody thought that was such a devastating sort of thing, and it was. But for us, it was happening all of the time. All of my friends that lived in the projects, we understand and know how to stack furniture. Mm-hmm. And if it rained, we were going to have to go stack our furniture so that it didn't get wet. I talk about this in the book too. Some of the things that were happening to us as a people, I don't think it was obvious to anybody, but to me today is very obvious. The projects were all concrete floors. The carpet wasn't popular, especially for those on the ground floor because so many, storms and rain. And so we had linoleum floors. So it'd be very easy when the flood came to rip the linoleum up and replace it. And I just thought about how that was a business for somebody in town. So it was actually a good thing for some, right? When we were flooded. And I just think, I say this in the book too, that the more we are educated as a people about our circumstances and the things that we can do about it, the better. If I just, in hindsight, think about what if somebody in our community owned the store that sold the linoleum? Or what if we had the proper representation to make sure that the city did what it needed to do, because there's public housing project, to fix the issue, so that we don't keep getting flooded as people. There was no care about that. Like today, the housing projects have been torn down. They don't exist. And there's nice soccer fields, and the city did this. And guess what? They don't flood. So they didn't have to flood when we were living there. The apartments didn't have to flood. It was a matter of, it's hard for some people to think that elected officials don't care. If you say that out loud, someone like, that's, you're just complaining. They really do care and whatever. Here's a real example that if there were a legitimate concern about public housing, that problem could have been fixed long while all the folks were living there and not after when they tore them down and made something that the city wanted to have as a nicer place for, it's a different environment there now. And, when we lived on the north side of town, everybody there was Black pretty much. That was the Black part of town. And so there wasn't so much of a concern for us is how I see it. If so, it would have been corrected.
It wasn't just the environment, but even from a family perspective, you had what I would call a tough situation because you lost your father at an early age and your mom had to take care of you and your siblings.
Yeah, I recall this too in the book. I have an appreciation for single moms and particularly single moms who come from underserved communities, African American moms. I can just reflect back on my mom. And, my father passed away. He was killed in a car wreck. My younger brother was an infant. I was 2 years old, and I had one other brother that was a year older than me. So we were 3, 2, and 1. And my mom had us by herself. A few months after my father passed away, then the one in between myself and my older brother, Michael, passed away too. So she had 2 major losses in a very short period of time. And, it was just her and my 3 brothers. And she was having to try to make it on her own with just a high school education.
What do you recall about that time and how did it shape your life, those 2 devastating experiences, especially so young?
Well, I was 2, so I didn't really know all what was going on with that. But again, in hindsight, when I reflect back, it definitely drives how I care and think about things today. I have a different appreciation for those moms who have circumstances that a lot of folks don't, have an understanding and how tough it is and how strong they really are and how there should be an effort to support and to, allow them to be all that they can for their kids. And I look back on my mom's situation and it drives me to try to do as much as I can today to make sure that those that deserve a chance get it.
And we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the podcast because I think you've kind of bucked this trend with your own family. But you do mention, and I agree with you, that coming from struggle actually has the opportunity to produce some very valuable traits in individuals that will lead to success, right? Not having the convenience, not having the creature comforts actually hones the values and the skills in you that later on pay dividends in your life. Talk to me a little bit about what it was like beyond the floods and the single mom scenario that you think allowed you to benefit from.
I don't know if it's so much based and steeped in struggle as much as it is exposure. Like, I think I was just exposed to a lot of things that happen in life and particularly happen in life for those who are not in advantaged places or in advantaged positions. So you just have to do more and try to do more with less, to survive. In the middle of it, you don't really realize all of that's happening. I know after I left Fort Smith and then went to school in Ohio, I went to Wilberforce, which is our nation's oldest privately owned historically Black college. I'm so proud of that and proud to have gone there. I went there, from a, kind of a rural type situation in Arkansas, and there were a lot of folks there similarly circumstanced as I was, and I found real bond and family in that. But I'm mentioning that because I think all of the folks, what I see as a common denominator is that when we got out of school to compete with those who may not have had to deal with life to the extent that we have, I always felt like I was at an advantage. And while the treatment and maybe the view of me as an African-American man trying to enter the corporate world may not have been anything more than the stereotypes that exist for us. And I felt a lot of that. But I was also prepared and knew how to deal with it, and it never really shook me. Some of the technical things that maybe people coming from an advantaged place had more than I did, I'd have to catch up to. But, this is one of the things that I teach folks, those that are trying to, get ahead and be entrepreneurs or whatever, is that you have to study, because your circumstance didn't provide for that. Whatever it is that you're trying to do, you need to be studious about it so that you can be as educated and informed about what you're doing as what they are. And then you add that to the life skills that you have, it puts you in a much better place than those folks that you're competing with for position, whether it's an entrepreneur or working in a corporate environment or whatever. So there is the opportunity for you to make that gap up by just, being committed and having discipline about trying to learn what you need to learn for what you're trying to do.
Shout out to Wilberforce University. I was telling you before the show that my dad attended it as well as Central across the street.
Yeah.
As well as Ohio University. He had some struggles getting through the first few. But before we jump into Wilberforce, because I do want to learn a little bit more about that phase of your life, one story you told in the book that was one of the most interesting parts to me was you won a contest. I think it was like a local grocery store contest. And as a 10-year-old, I believe, took a trip from Arkansas to California.
Yeah.
Is that right? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. My mom used to always joke with me because I've always, I've never been really afraid of anything. And whenever there was something going on in town, I always wanted to go. And she was like, your middle name should have been Go, because you always want to do something. So Winton's IGA is Winton's grocery store that was right down the street, a block from where we lived. We moved out of the projects for a brief period, and we moved up on 10th Street, which was a house that my mom's uncle owned. And so she was renting the house from him, so we moved out of the projects. We wound up moving back to the projects, after a while, and we loved it. Myself and my brothers, we were ready to go back, because that's where everything was. Just talking about, you don't realize who would aspire to go live in the projects. We were happy about that. But Win's IGA was having this contest basically where you had to collect these box tops or whatever, and that the kid that got the most would be able to go on a trip. There was a regional thing, so they had a bunch of other kids that were selected too, and it was a bus. They had chaperones and adults that were chaperoning the kids on this, but my mom let me go. And I went on this bus trip, and it went from Arkansas and went all the way out to LA and to San Francisco. We went to, all of the sightseeing places, Knott's Berry Farm, Disneyland, and we went up to the San Francisco sites, Union Square, Ghirardelli Square, and all the stuff. And I got to see all of that. And it was definitely something that stuck with me, that I knew that I wasn't going to stay in Fort Smith.
Right.
And today, as I look back on that, it just makes me know that to the extent that we can expose our kids to more, then it inspires to do more than what maybe they see on a day-to-day basis. It definitely was impactful for me like that.
Yeah, exposure is the key. I mean, that's what I love so much about that story. I remember when I was a freshman in high school, my mom put me on the Greyhound and sent me to Atlanta to experience the AUC. And I think about now, with our parents likely to do that? And the answer is probably no, but those exposure opportunities is really what let us know there was more out there.
Well, I mean, I think the thing is, while it's a different world and you have to be careful with your kids, but you can expose them. You don't have to turn them over to somebody else for those things. And it's not about necessarily the expense of things. You could drive wherever you want to go. Like I was on a bus. It's just about being intentional with what you do. When I'm talking to folks about parenting and how it is that you can have influence on the next generation, I think if everybody just focused on their job as a parent and just got really disciplined about it, folks were like, well, I mean, you don't know my situation. I got to go to work every day and whatever all this. Yeah, I have full appreciation for that. But I also know that for whatever it is that you want to do, there's a way to do that. And, if you take serious, what's going to happen for your children, it'll cause you to do a lot of things differently. It's just, there's no excuse, really. Everybody can do within their means things to put their children in a place where they're not confounded by the circumstance of what you don't have if you're not, someone of means or whatever. It's about being intentional.
Yeah, you use that word a lot in your book, and I can see it not only in your terminology, but in the actions that you've carried out on.
Yeah.
So how does a young kid from the Elm Grove projects in Arkansas make it to Wilberforce University?
Yes, some of these things that happen for us in life are circumstantial. I don't believe in coincidence. I think everything's sort of divinely ordered. So I believe what happened for me was what was supposed to happen for me. But I didn't do that well in high school. I wasn't that focused. It wasn't that I wasn't capable. It's just that I wasn't that focused. I didn't like necessarily the environment that was there. And it feels like I'm being really critical of, what happened with high school and all of that now. And I don't like to be that way about it. But in hindsight, I'm really just telling the truth about what happened. Like, I don't remember me, or maybe with exception, there's a few that I don't know who they are, being counseled about going to college.
Mm-hmm.
None of the guidance counselors talked to me about where I was going to go to school and what I needed to do, and you need to take the SAT and whatever. And that guidance I needed because my mom graduated from high school.
Mm-hmm.
So she didn't necessarily know about the SAT and things that I needed to do to situate myself to be able to go to college. And so, I look at it as a break that I had. The pastor of my church, I'm a lifelong member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, AME Church. And my pastor, G. Edward West, knew President Wilberforce and called up and, made contact and made the arrangement for me to be able to go to Wilberforce with marginal grades and with exceptions being made for me to go to school there. And it was life-changing.
I can imagine that it was. So many of the individuals who are on this show have attended historically Black colleges and universities. And the fact that someone reached out on your behalf in order to enable that to happen is as you say, a divine intervention and obviously something that was meant to be. What was it like when you got to Wilberforce? What was different from a young kid coming from Arkansas, going up to the HBCU? What was that life like, and how did it shape you?
Well, so this is kind of weird. Like, so I grew up in the projects. Everybody was Black, right? So that I was accustomed to that. But then when I went to high school, we were the minority. Like, we were a small fraction or percentage of the high school. And we didn't really, it was still kind of wasn't officially a segregated situation, but it was. We did everything as a group, all the Black kids and all the white kids did everything together, and they were doing stuff that we didn't know about. But I was in that every day. So when I went to Wilberforce, I was back in a school environment like it was in the project. Like, it was very comfortable for me and exciting, actually, to be around people. I was feeling like I was in heaven.
Right.
Yeah, it was good.
What did you study at Wilberforce?
Business. I was a business major. I went there. One of the big things that I was excited about in going to Wilberforce was the fact that it had a co-op program. It was the hallmark of what was going on there, and it was a very good program. So they had all the major corporations that were coming in to recruit us as students. And so it was mandatory as a part of your graduation requirement that you had to do 3 co-ops. So we were on the trimester system. So you essentially were in school all year round, 2 trimesters on campus, and then 1 working with whomever it is that you were able to get a job with as these corporates came on the campus to recruit all of us. So that was very good. And I was fortunate that my internships or co-ops were with General Motors and with Westin Hotels. Westin Hotels was just becoming the big thing, the new kind of thing. And so the first 2 I did with Central Foundry, General Motors up in Saginaw, Michigan. And the third I did with Westin Hotels in Los Angeles. So I drove to LA and worked the whole summer and worked in a rotation with at the Century Plaza Hotel in LA.
Those had to be tremendous learning opportunities because I'm a big fan of internships. I was an Enroad intern
Mm,
and worked at Procter and Gamble in Cincinnati
mm,
in high school and college.
mm,
So, and I remember learning some of the basics, like you wear a blue suit on the first day of
mm,
work
mm,
and,
mm,
how to take notes and write a memo and things of
mm.
that nature. What do you recall about those internship experiences?
Some of the similar things, you needing to kind of grow up professionally. It was good too working for Central Foundry at General Motors. There was one of my fraternity brothers who was recruiting he had went to Wilberforce and went and had been, was a senior person in GM and came back to Wilberforce to recruit students. And I was one of the students that he recruited up there. So I had a real mentor. His name's Kenny Glass. And so Brother Glass was very helpful to me in teaching me these things that you're talking about, dress for success, how it is that you carry yourself professionally at work and just those learnings. So I learned a lot there. It was a union environment in General Motors. That was very informative to me, to learn how the union actually works. So I learned a lot about business. They were very informative to me. And I drew some things from those experiences as an entrepreneur later.
And when you went out to LA, there was no temptation to stay on the West Coast?
Man, and that summer in LA was like, that was a great summer. It was a great summer. I went out, I pledged Kappa Alpha Psi, and so I was new to the fraternity. And I went out, I drove out by myself, cross country. And I got there, and the first thing I did was to try to meet some of the brothers in the fraternity that could show me around. And I met Larry Lee. He was from Dayton, Ohio. He played football at UCLA. And he was up for the draft. He just had graduated and we was about to be drafted to play in the NFL. He went on to play in the NFL. But that was my friend. Like we just hung out the whole summer.
Mm-hmm.
And he showed me all around LA and that. So I worked and then I had fun playing that summer.
You lit up when we talked about that summer in LA, so I know it was great.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good time. I was young and having fun.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you graduate from Wilberforce, and what did you decide to do at that point?
I took the first job that I had was to go to Washington, D.C., and I worked for what is now CVS, People's Drug Stores at the time. And I went there and I worked in a store as an assistant manager. I worked with HR and as a field rep for a little while. So it was sort of my first job out of college. And I did that for a little while. And then one of my mom's friends in Fort Smith, a gentleman by the name of George Fisher, called her and told her that Arkansas Best Freight, which was a trucking company, was recruiting students. And so I went back to Arkansas. I didn't actually go to work for ABF at that time, but I went back to Arkansas and I started working for Whirlpool. I had a nice job at Whirlpool, working in as a materials expediter there and learned more corporately there. And then I took the job that Mr. Fisher had put in front of me to move from Arkansas to Brooklyn, New York, to work for ABF in a sales role.
So you're getting a lot of cross-country exposure.
Yeah.
You're getting Midwest, you're getting South, you're getting West Coast. Now you're up in the Northeast.
Yeah.
Any takeaways from the diversity of geography and how it shapes you?
This is such a great question. My mom said my middle name should be Go, right? Like I just never was afraid of, trying something new, and I was getting exposed every place that I went to something new and different and learning. And it was exciting for me to try something, to go someplace else. And I did learn, a lot. Every experience was different. Professionally, it was different. Socially, it was different. And I was growing up. This is early on in my, my professional life. And I think it translated later because, like, when I went to work for Dun & Bradstreet, we moved 11 or 12 times.
Mm.
And every time there was a different and bigger opportunity. So that was the thing that I was taking away from it, that every chance that I did something different, it was moving me to another level.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to get stagnated. I never felt like, ooh, I want to be right here at this place because I always felt like if I did that, then I wouldn't keep growing.
Mm-hmm.
So I always embraced these opportunities. I mean, it was a different time corporately with moves because they were moving, most of the big companies were moving people around. Again, with D&B, I moved over 10, 12 times.
Mm-hmm.
And every time it was good. You know, we went to a bigger house and, you know, a bigger job. And my kids, you know, Ryan was born in LA. And when he was 2, we moved to New Jersey. When he was 3, we moved to DC. He, you know, by the time Ryan was 10, he'd lived a number of places.
Right.
And I'm sure, and he'll tell you today that was, you know, influential. Same thing with Lauren, my daughter. She was born in Maryland. Then we moved from Maryland to Atlanta. And then we moved from Atlanta to North Carolina, and then it was Chicago, and it was back. So both of them got a flavor for that. And I think it's made them more worldly in terms of their view. And Lauren, just for her 30th birthday, she had set a goal that she wanted to go to 30 countries by the time she was 30.
Mm.
And she went to a 30th country on her 30th birthday.
I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Tell Lauren to take me with her next time.
Right.
So it seems like a lot happened while at D&B. How did you get to D&B?
Yeah, that's a real cool story too. So my wife and I were married while I was living in New York. When I took the job and went to work for ABF in New York, I would go back to Ohio, and Shelley was studying at the University of Cincinnati. She was working on her PharmD, her doctorate in pharmacology.
So where did you meet Shelley at?
I met her while I was in school at Wilberforce.
Okay.
Her brother and I were both in the same fraternity Kappas, and we were having a party for him, and she was at Howard, and she came down for the party that we were having for him, and I met her. And so we stayed in touch while she was at Howard, while I was at Wilberforce. I graduated and moved to DC. She graduated from Howard and moved to Ohio, so we kind of swapped places.
Right.
And we were kind of in touch, but not really. And then when I was in New York, I came back to Wilberforce for the fraternity have something every year in March. She was there for one weekend, and we rekindled our relationship. And so we started, you know, sort of long distance dating while she was in pharmacy school and I was working in New York. And I just decided I didn't really want to, you know, really be in New York, and I didn't see that job really taking me where I wanted to go. So I moved to Cincinnati. We decided to marry. And we got married in Cincinnati, and she wanted to finish her doctorate in pharmacy. And there was a program at the University of Arizona that she applied for and got in. So we moved across country to Arizona. And when we got there, we both had to work. We didn't have money. And so, you know, I sold cable for a few weeks while I was there. This is when cable first came out.
Mm-hmm.
I was going door to door selling cable.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dun & Bradstreet ran an ad in the paper. And the ad said specifically, do not try to apply in person.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the opposite of that. I wouldn't apply in person.
Right.
And I went in and it worked out great. There was a lady who saw me come in. Her name is Marcia Durkin. Marcia's passed away since. But they were having a training class that next week in California. All the new hires, they sent to California for training. And so I was put into that next class. So I got hired, and the next week I was shipped off for training out to California.
So it seems like it pays to go against the grain and break the rules every now and then.
You gotta take chances, you know, you gotta separate yourself. I mean, they could have said, the paper said, no, you can't do this in person. In my mind, I thought, okay, if they told me that, then all right, then I'll just apply.
Right.
But there wasn't anything for me to lose in that, I didn't think. So, and it turns out that it was beneficial for me.
And talk to me about the importance as an entrepreneur of having a spouse who is supportive of the endeavor, as I know Shelley is, but also how it sounds like, as she was a professional as well, that she was probably able to, as you all were getting your family off the ground, lessen the burden.
Yeah, I mean, it's a true partnership that Shelley and I have, and it's based and steeped in a lot of trust. I was working for D&B and things were good. And again, they were moving us and, the house was getting bigger and everything was great and the kids were doing great. And then D&B decided to outsource the work that I had been responsible for. And I knew the senior person's name is Tal Phillips. He's a dear friend now. And it's always been a mentor for me. And, he and I was talking about it and he's like, look, this would be an opportunity for you. So I started a company and D&B was my first customer. So they gave me a $25,000 contract to get started. That's a big step. I had to bet on the fact that I would take that contract into something bigger to kind of outstrip what I was actually making. It was a big choice to make. And Shelley was very supportive. When we were walking, I said, I think I'm going to go for this. And she's like, you sure? Because, salary and all the things I was going to need to do to kind of move this initiative forward. But I said, yeah, I just explained that if this didn't work out, then I could always go back to work.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't burning a bridge with D&B. In fact, I was helping them kind of usher the way for them to get into outsourcing. So she trusted if it didn't work, that I would go back to work and everything would be all right.
And how old were your kids when that opportunity came about?
So this would have been 2000. So Ryan would have been 9, maybe, 1999, and Lauren would have been 5.
I hear a lot of entrepreneurs say, and there's different ways to do it, but I've seen a lot of success in entrepreneurs whose first customer was the company they were working for.
Uh-huh.
Do you endorse that as a methodology for other entrepreneurs, or is it kind of unique to the situation and circumstance?
Well, I mean, every situation is different, but what I would say is the fundamental thing about having a business is having a customer.
Mm-hmm.
So I never was a person who really aspired to be an entrepreneur. That wasn't something that, I was taught, you get a job, you work your way up, and, you take care of your family, but whatever job it is that you hold down. Not to necessarily own or operate a business, which I think is a travesty, too. We got to teach more of that in these communities where it's not taught and where it's not standard. But so I always just thought I would work professionally, and things were going well for me professionally. So I'm saying that to say I don't really endorse let me mortgage my house, I have to be an entrepreneur, at all costs. And so to the extent that you can usher yourself into being an entrepreneur with an established relationship that you already have, having worked for a company that can be your customer, that's a pretty good, solid way to start an entrepreneurial path, I think, yeah.
You mentioned the potential reservation that Shelley mentioned, and I'm sure you had it too around salary. Did you have any other doubts about the ability to execute or pull it off, or because it was something you were familiar with, you were very confident in your ability to deliver?
Yeah, I was confident that I could do it. But I'm not a risk-averse person either.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty tolerant of taking chances and nothing ventured, nothing gained is how I think about things. I always think about things big. I've never suffered from smallness of thought. I don't know. I don't know if that's just a born thing or what, a personality thing or what, but I've never really suffered from that. But the security blanket for me was I could go back to work. I mean, it was very simple for me. I'll try this, and if it's good, I'm not going to be, crazy about it. I got to care for my family. I have a responsibility. So whatever it was going to take for me to do that. If this business wasn't going to work, then I would have to get a job.
After the break, will Mark's gamble pay off immediately, or will he have to go back to work before finally breaking through as an entrepreneur? I'm Troy Evans, and you're listening to Give 'Em the Business. Give 'Em the Business is sponsored by Oasis Vacations. You deserve the luxury vacation of your dreams. Don't leave your travel accommodations to chance and take the worry out of your next destination vacation. Be well traveled and visit vacationwithoasis.com. Give 'em the Business is sponsored by The Funnel Creative. The Funnel Creative's mission is to empower Black crew and content creators to bring your visual production to life. To learn more, visit us at thefunnelcreative.com. Give 'em the Business is sponsored by LRVP Investment Fund. Stop settling for mediocre returns and exorbitant fees on your investment. Take control of your financial future by investing in luxury vacation homes. Reduce your tax burden, earn double-digit returns, and enjoy luxury vacations with your family. To learn more, visit lrvpfund.com. We're talking with Mark Wilson, founder of Ryla Teleservices and Chime Solutions. Mark was enjoying a successful career and was moving up in corporate America, but he wanted to bet on himself. Was a contract from his current employer the boost he needed to make the leap? So what was that first year or two like? You got the contract in hand, but $25,000, even in $2,000 is not going to go that far. So what was that first year or two like?
Well, I had to do more than the 25,000. I mean, I had to care for my family, and obviously I was making more money than that. And there was other people that we had to involve, but that's just what it started out to be. I mean, we had more work than that. They kept giving us more work, but that was kind of the foundational contract we had. But it's tough. You can't get any financing from a bank. Everything is bootstrapping. You just have to be scrappy. Being an entrepreneur is not for everybody. Not worrying about and getting too down about things I think that's maybe another born thing for me. It's just I always feel like I can figure it out. There's a way to figure it out. There's a way to have something get done. And that resilience, I think, was very helpful for me to get through those tough years when I didn't have a bank and I didn't have really anything. We raised $1 million of seed capital, pretty early on. That was helpful. That took a little bit of the edge off, but that money was immediately spent because we needed stuff.
I'm sure it was. Talk to me a little bit about raising that capital because, as you know, I'm in the capital raising game myself, and it is not an easy endeavor. What did you find allowed you to be successful when raising capital?
So I was trying to figure out how to do it. I knew nothing about it. And one of my fraternity brothers, Earl Peak is his name. First, he was responsible for introducing me to the call center. When we got the $25,000 contract, we outsourced everything to another partner in Houston, the Houston Community Call Centers. So that's how they got started. But he introduced me to two young ladies. They had just come out of Jackson Securities, and they started a company. The Elpis Group was the name of the company. Their charter was to help companies like mine do models and write business plan to try to go out and raise capital. And they did that for us. They put a model together and put it in front of a few people. And one of the funds that they put it in front of was a fund in North Carolina called the Sustainable Jobs Fund. So there's capital out there that has what is called a double bottom line. So there's funds that invest in companies to get a financial return, but also some social return for whatever they're focused on. In the case of sustainable jobs, it was investing in companies that were going to create sustainable jobs. Our model had that. So they invested $750,000, and then shortly thereafter, another $250,000, so $1 million of seed capital for us. It was the thing that got us kicked off.
And Jackson Securities, as in Maynard Jackson's firm?
Yeah, they had worked there and left there to start their own company, helping companies like mine.
So you raise $1 million, you've got repeat business from D&B. What does the growth trajectory look like for, and this is Ryla that we're talking about right
Yeah,
now, right?
Ryla was named for my children. RY for Ryan, LA for Lauren. Yeah.
So what does that growth trajectory look like for Ryla?
So for the first, call it 5 years, it was kind of, we were able to find other customers. It was not the ideal type of work. We were doing kind of cold call sales. We were doing anything to kind of, get revenue. But we went from 0 to about 16 million, and we were trying to raise more capital. And Frontier Capital had looked at us at the beginning, but because we were too early stage, they passed. But they kept in touch with us and kept up with us. So 5 years in now, we're between 16 and 20 million in revenue. And they said we did everything we told them we were going to do, and they were now ready to invest. So they invested $5 million, and then they had Ed Crutchfield, who's a founder of Wachovia Bank, invested his personal money alongside of them. He got introduced, and I met with him, and he came in too. So in that round, we raised $7 million. We invested that money into the company, and the company went from, call it 20 million in revenue to north of 100 in 1 year.
Wow.
Yeah.
So 5x growth with that access to capital that you needed, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what is the employee infrastructure and human resources? What is needed to go from 20 million in revenue to 100 million in revenue?
That's a lot. I mean, it's not just, it's every discipline that you can think of for the business that we were in, which we were in call centers. So a lot of employees and everything around employees. My wife, Shelly, joined the company before this, early on. So she had all of the administrative and HR functions under her responsibility. But you have to build out your team, for every discipline that you need to run the business, from accounting and finance to marketing to whatever it is that you need to successfully scale a business.
About how many employees did you have?
I think we probably had, I don't know, few hundred people at 20, then a couple thousand people at 100.
So I just had a previous guest talk about how one thing that he wants to avoid and has avoided in his entrepreneurship endeavors is he didn't want to work with his spouse because he wanted to kind of keep a separation between church and state, as to say. But you just mentioned how Shelly was playing a pivotal role in the success of the company by having certain disciplines under her responsibility. What was that like for you, having your spouse be an integral part of the success of the company?
Well, our company was built on culture and sort of a family structure. And the thing we were trying to be for the folks that work for us were the example of what a good, solid married couple looked like. And it was never hard for us because she had the responsibilities that she did in the company and I had what I had. And we understood. I mean, the thing about Shelly and I, how we run our life, it has to do with roles. And I have responsibilities, she has responsibilities. We're very comfortable with both, in our house, we're comfortable with what those roles are. And it was the same at work. And it also gave us a chance to model and be the example to the extent that we could. I mean, we weren't trying to hold ourselves up as, anything. But we knew that we're faithful people with a firm belief in God and morally doing things in our business the way that they should be done. And we just felt like that's something that should be held up for people to see.
And one of the things I remember reading in the book was about you being intentional about bringing your kids into work so they could also see, as your employees did, you kind of an example of how things should be done and exposing them to that. Tell me a little bit about that.
One of my mentors told me that the secret for him and his children and raising his children successfully is that he took them everywhere. Like they never shied away from taking their kids wherever they went. And he said, this is going to be the start of Ryan going everywhere. And that's what we kept at. So like how they learned how to behave in a restaurant was going to the restaurant. It was just a routine thing and common thing that I was never uncomfortable in a meeting taking them or having them come to the office so that they could get exposed to what we were doing.
I love that. So Ryla went to over $100 million a year. And then what did you decide to do?
We were immediately out of cash. So the money we raised, now we're at another level, so you need more financing, right? So we went back out to run a process to raise some more capital. And it got very, very interesting in that there were a lot of folks that were interested in the company, very competitive. And it led to, instead of recapitalizing the business, to selling the business. And we had one of our competitors, Alorica, who made an offer. It's kind of interesting story because it got very competitive, and there was one other, company that was very much interested in us and got really far down the line, but they kept retrading, and we had a partner, Frontier Capital, who basically got fatigued on this retrading and said, "Listen, we're either going to do this deal and close it, or." We had other suitors, and the deal got really preempted by Alorica coming in and buying the company.
And was that capital from Frontier, was that a debt or equity deal?
We had debt and equity in the company.
Okay. And so what year was this that you ended up taking the buyout?
2000, year 2000.
That was in 2000?
2010, I'm sorry.
2010, okay.
2000 when we got
you got the capital, right, yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things
about 10 years.
That's interesting to me is a lot of individuals, they see the result, right? But they don't see the process of how you got there. And they want the instantaneous microwave success, right? But what's still interesting to me is that, you thought about going out on your own in 1999, 2000, and within 10 years, you've got a $100 million company that you are now selling, and your life is probably completely changed from where it was just 10 years earlier. And to me, that's lightning fast, although there was a process to it, right? What are your thoughts about that?
I just think that because I lived those 10 years.
It was long.
It didn't feel like it was overnight for me.
Right.
There were a lot of long days and sleepless nights and a lot of work put in.
I remember reading once that Shelly called you one day and said, you all aren't going to make payroll if you don't empty out your personal account. And I'm imagining that's one of those sleepless nights.
Yeah, it was actually more intense than that. It was during the day that we had paid everybody, thought we had made payroll. And some folks were going to the bank and their checks, this was at Ryla really early on, like in the first, real early days. And a bill had gotten paid out of the account, and it was causing there not to be enough money for folks' checks to get cashed. And a lot of our folks go right to the bank to cash their check. And so 3 or 4 people got turned away before it got back to us, and I had to hurry to get to the bank and take money out of our personal account to make sure that the money was there for people to be paid.
Entrepreneurship isn't for everyone.
Not even.
And you sell the company in 2010. Then what do you decide to do?
I had non-competes, and I was just comfortable. I wanted to help. I wanted to leverage my experience and help other entrepreneurs. So I took an entrepreneur in residence position with Donna Ennis down Georgia Tech at the Minority Business Development Agency. And I set up office hours there, and I would just help other entrepreneurs. And then a Frontier called up and said, why don't we look at some other businesses? This was, maybe a couple of years or maybe 2 years afterwards. And that's when we decided to buy E-Verifile and have me run it and put my management team back in place there.
So you probably have been doing it your entire life, but you have the opportunity to to take a residency at Georgia Tech and give back to future entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
A trend that you're going to keep going for years to come. But then someone that you've had a company that you've had a great business experience with comes back and says, let's do this again. And that is when you started, you said
E-Verify. It was an existing business. We just went and bought it. So I had my personal cash in, Frontier put cash in, and then we had Ukaipa and Magic Johnson together. They put money in.
And so they really wanted your expertise and execution and managing the business brought to the table.
That's correct. There was a good run with Ryla.
Right.
And they understood, what my skill set was and the strength of my team. So it was a comfortable thing for us to get together,
right,
to go and buy E-Verify.
So you have a scenario where you build a business from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a scenario where you acquire a business.
Yeah.
Which do you recommend to future entrepreneurs?
There's challenges, in each of them. But, being able to establish things on your own terms and not really trying to shift and mold culture to be what you want it to be versus what it's already been established to be in an acquisition, my preference would be to start my own. I think it's a personal preference.
Right. So you have E-Verify for a couple of years, and then you start a call center business within it.
Yeah, so the business model with E-Verify, call center kind of fit with it. And we were having some conversations with former customers, and they were like, look, we'll just tuck it in. And we created this customer service division of E-Verify. And then as that started getting bigger, then I just went to the partnership and said, look, I'd like to spin this off and get back in the call center world. My non-competes are gone now, and let's go back and start this up. Let's get back into this business. Let me and my management team do that. And we'll leave the core business back to what it was. And that's what happened.
And the new spinoff is Chime.
Yep. Okay. Chime Solutions. Yep.
And that is the one that is based in Morrow.
Yeah, it's based in Morrow.
And then you also had offices in Dallas, or locations in Dallas and Charlotte as well.
Well, so the model at Chime was we wanted to create jobs in underserved communities. In fact, we had a goal of creating 10,000 jobs in underserved communities. And the first call center that we established was down in Morrow, South Atlanta or Clayton County, a lot of talent. And there was an old JCPenney's that was available. We went in and we built it out, and that's what we made into a state-of-the-art call center there. And then we took that same model and we went to Dallas with it. In fact, there was a city councilman there in Dallas that had learned about what we were doing here. And there was a proprietor, Peter Brodsky, he and his partner, Terrence Maiden, were working with the city of Dallas to renovate South Dallas. And they were using the same kind of concept that we had here with an old shopping mall. And so they brought Councilman Atkins here, and they looked at what we did here, and they were immediately interested in us doing that in Dallas. We eventually did in Charlotte as well. Just trying to put the center in place where we could create jobs and give opportunities to people who've been historically left out.
So I've been to the mall in Atlanta, and I've been to Redbird in Dallas. I didn't go to the one in Charlotte, but that's also one of the things that is most impressive to me about you is never been just about the money. It's been also about creating opportunities and livelihood for the individuals that work for your company. And again, I'll come back to that word intentionality, right? About making sure that individuals can provide a living for themselves and for their families and whatnot. And I can't say that that's been the first thought for most entrepreneurs. Where do you think that purpose came from with you, that you've been able to deliver that type of, a lot of people talk the talk, but not everyone shows up and actually gives back to the community and tries to have impact beyond just the money they're making?
Yeah. We talked at the beginning of this about the influence of Fort Smith, Arkansas, where I'm from, and Elm Grove housing projects. I think that's where it all is born out of me understanding and looking back on that and knowing that there were any number of people smarter, more talented than me that didn't have the breaks that I ultimately have, or didn't get a chance to come out of that circumstance. And to me, that's a travesty. And it exists more than just in the Elm Grove housing projects. It's everywhere in the country. And for sure in Clayton County and in Oak Cliff and in Dallas. For sure that talent like existed in Fort Smith exists there, where people are way smarter than me that need an opportunity to be able to have that come to fruition. And so, I think that's the big motivator for me is that I want to see, I get joy out of seeing the success of others. I don't know how else to explain it except for to think that that's influenced by my life circumstance.
And how long did you hold on to Chime?
We were at Chime since 2015, and then we sold it in 23, so maybe 8 years.
And what was its peak revenue?
About $60 million.
So you were able to repeat the process the success that you had at Ryla and repeat it and find another buyer for Chime in 2023.
That's correct. Yeah.
And now that I'm not going to make any assumptions. Is there another call center solution in your future, or is that part of your business life behind you?
I've done call center and sort of maxed out what I think my influence on that business model is. So likely not going to be doing it. I'm right now working with a company that bought us, and I'm helping them with the transition of my customers and extending some of the things that I did in Chime around impact. So my position is the Chief Impact Officer there at VXI. And, I get a lot of calls from other entrepreneurs who are, need help. And I think all of the experience that I have that's been given to me, that was done so that I could help somebody else. And so I'm trying to be faithful about that. And so I'm helping a few other entrepreneurs with, cultivating their idea and, trying to help them, do what they need to do to raise capital. And I mentioned the double bottom line, capital that's out there. There's an organization called the Community Development Venture Capitalist Association, the CDVCA. So Sustainable Jobs was a member fund of the CDVCA. And over the years, I just had a strong relationship with Kerwin Teasdale, who's the president there. And we've recently been reconnected. And so I've been, acting in an entrepreneur in residence for them, helping businesses, with raising capital. So I think that's where I'm called, is to, try to do what I can to help other entrepreneurs, realize their full potential. And so likely my future will have something doing that. I was fortunate how I met Kerwin. There was the CDVCA commissioned a business case to be written by Harvard Business Review when I was at Ryla. So they wrote a business case on us, Harvard Business Review did, or Harvard Business School. And Kerwin was teaching that business case to his law students and I think MBA students. He would invite me up to NYU when he was teaching the class. And so we kept in touch over the years, and that's led to us now being reconnected today. But since then, HBS wrote another business case on Chime. So I've had 2 business cases on the companies that I founded, written by Harvard Business School.
So they're learning about you in business schools all over the country now.
Yeah, and I'm getting a chance to participate in the classroom when the cases are being taught. So I'm an executive fellow at Harvard Business School right now. So I'll go out and help other professors teach our story.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And the apples don't fall far from the tree because both of your children are entrepreneurs as well. Tell me a little bit about the journey for them and the pride you have in that.
It's probably the most fun that I'm having right now is to help my children kind of think through what they're doing as business owners. Lauren has a software company that has so much potential, and she's just out of the ground in just about a year now. She's already raised a couple of rounds of outside financing. And then Ryan has the Gathering Spot, which it's a little bit more mature, maybe 8 years old now, with locations here in Atlanta, LA, and in DC. Soon to open Houston later this year, and making a real impact in the community with that business. And both of them are on several boards and very active, and just good people at the end of the day. They really care about others, and Shelley and I are very proud of what both of them are doing.
Well, I hope to have them on Give Them the Business as a guest in the near future. So I always ask my guests to give our listeners the real business on, what you would want the next generation of entrepreneur to know before they take that step. But before I ask you that question, I want you to tell me a little bit about, because you answer it a little bit in your book, The Remarkable Power of Us, which is an excellent book that I've had the pleasure of reading. Tell me a little bit about what inspired you to write it, and any other information that you think you would want someone to know before they pick it up.
Well, I mean, as I tell my story, like what we've been talking about here today, I would always get, you should write a book. That should be in a book. And I never really kind of wanted to do that. I think it's kind of self-aggrandizing to, be talking about yourself and whatever in a book. But then I thought about it, and I'm thinking that there are a lot of things about my experience that others can use, and that I should make sure that those lessons and that experience gets out. So that was the motivation for it. Plus, I wanted to inspire us as a community to understand and know what we're capable of. I mean, I tell a lot of stories in the book about things that we've done in our past that we don't even realize what we've done in our past with less, actually. And so part of what I wanted to do in the book is to tell those type of stories and to have all of us to start to wake up to that we can be self-determinant. We can do things if we are intentional and decide to.
One of the reasons why I started giving the business was to share the successful business stories of entrepreneurs, because we hear of the entertainer stories and the athlete stories, but we don't hear about the Mark Wilsons or the Mike Hollises or the Bill Picards or what have you that have been successful. And going back to that term exposure, if individuals don't know it's possible, they're least likely to dream it. And one of the things I took away from your book was not only empowering the readers with the belief and the possibility of having success based on what others have done and being exposed to what they've done, but I also got a sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the charge of responsibility, because no one else is going to do it for us, no one else is going to come to our rescue. We need those that are successful to reinvest in the community, and for that paradigm to become the new normal, as opposed to the way we approach things now.
Nobody's coming to save us. And I just think that where we are today, again, if I just draw the comparison from how much access and wealth that we have in our community for those that have made it, and I'm not trying to spend anybody else's money. That's not, I'm not trying to chastise somebody who's made it, that they should go and, everybody has to make their own choice about things. But as for me, I feel like there is a responsibility that I have to try to correct whatever disparities that exist between us and others. Because it's not about talent and capability and intellect, any of that. There has been 100+ years of, us being, left behind that we need to try to overcome. I'm not trying to, give credit to that in terms of what our plight is right now. But I also don't want to close a blind eye to the fact that we have a lot. And there are a lot of folks that do have a lot. And that if we really care about us, the collective of us, that there is the chance and the ability for us to do something about the disparities that exist.
Excellent. So now it's time for you to give the listener the business on what you would want them to know or what you would want them to be prepared for if they decide to take that step into entrepreneurship or even corporate leadership? Because you spent many years in corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to impart on the listener about how to achieve the success that you've had in your life?
Well, I give honor and glory to God. I'm a faithful person. I just trust and believe that things are, we all have a mission and a plight in life, and that's a divine order, and that we should try to pay attention and link up to that and have that be a guide for whatever it is that you decide to do. Then outside of that, you have to really understand what it is that you're venturing to do. Without the understanding at a deep level, it's hard for there to be sustainable success. You really have to know, how does it make money? What are the challenges for the industry? What are the things that I have to do? You have to be studious and to make sure that you have yourself in a position where you know everything you need to know to put your business idea forward. There's tons of information different than any point in our history to help entrepreneurs and those that are trying to make the decision to start a business or not, that can help you with not making mistakes that others have made. And I would say surround yourself with people that do have experience, that care and want to help. That's important too.
Mark, thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for giving us the business.
Yeah, I'm happy to have been here. Thank you so much.
That's Mark Wilson, founder of Ryla Teleservices and Chime Solutions. If you want to hear more about his story, make sure to read his book. If you want to learn more about the Black entrepreneurs and business leaders who have made an impact, make sure to subscribe to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, make sure to follow us on social media at Give 'Em the Business Podcast. And if you want to send me a message, you can find me at I am Troy D. Evans. Give 'Em the Business is produced by 2 Comma Media. Thanks for listening, and remember to Troy harder.